On today's show, we break down the five best two-way defensemen eligible for the 2024 NHL Draft class.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And we are in the midst of a series where we are breaking down the top five players in a given player archetype or profile eligible for the 2024 NHL Draft class. So these rankings have a bit less to do with actual projection and ranking in a holistic sense than they do of the individual strengths as a quote-unquote two-way defenseman. In this episode, we covered the best goal scorers, the best playmakers, and the best offensive defensemen already, and we have a couple more of these episodes lined up for you. But before we jump in today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Alrighty, so before we actually jump into the official top five in our little ranking here, we have five honorable mentions to present to you. So this is a solo episode with me, but Hattie did give in his ballot for all of these slots, so I combined mine with his to distinguish the players that made this episode. So in no particular order, we're going to launch right into the honorable mentions here, and starting off, one of Hattie's favorites, Harrison Brunicke. He is a right shot defenseman, 6'3", 187 pounds, born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and he's been playing in the WHL with the Kamloops Blazers. The point production as its own isn't the most outstanding thing in the world. He played 49 WHL games, scored 10 goals, added 11 assists for 21 points. But very few players put up many points on that Kamloops team, and Brunicke has some fantastic tools to elevate his offensive game. He's a really high-end puck handler. There have been some real flashes of brilliance in creating offense almost single-handedly from the blue line, and he's also a pretty solid skater. His defensive implications have been pretty good most of the season. There have been some exceptions to that, but for the most part, he's a really solid two-way presence. And while he didn't have the most spectacular of U18 World Championship performances for Team Canada, he still should be a top 64 selection, maybe even a first-round selection. And he brings both that offensive upside with also a decent foundation of habits. Next up, we have Jesse Pulkkinen, the hulking 6'6", 216-pound left shot defenseman out of Finland, who is an overager. He was eligible actually for the 2023 NHL Draft class, but really made his mark in this past season, playing primarily in Liga, Finland's their top professional league, where he played 29 games, scored 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points, and he played 18 games at the U20 level, the same league where last year he played 43 games and he got only 4 assists. This year he played 18 games and scored a casual 11 goals, 17 assists for 28 points, going 10 points over his game tally in that league, which is absurd progression in terms of raw numbers and output. But there's so much to like with Pulkkinen. He's a really good skater, a really good puck handler, and he uses his reach and his range and his physicality very effectively to break down play defensively. He's a really good rush defender, and there are definitely moments and flashes of neuroticism in his game. There will be hair-pulling moments with him, at least for the coming couple seasons. So while he may perhaps not be the most chill two-way defenseman in the world, he takes a ton of risks, and his coaches will want to pair him with perhaps a stabilizing force. He is very capable at both sides of the ice, on both sides of the puck, and in a variety of roles. He's a really intriguing prospect. Next, we have Charlie Elick. He's a big right shot defenseman, 6'3", 198 pounds, who played in the WHL for the Brandon Wheat Kings this season, scoring 4 goals and 27 points through 65 games. And he's a really good skater. He's big, he's powerful, he throws his weight around. He's perhaps a little bit of like a shutdown mold of player, but with the puck on his stick, he's a pretty decent puck mover, especially in terms of launching that play in the breakout. That first pass is pretty strong. You're not going to want him to be handing the puck up the ice and creating offense a ton. He's not going to be the primary offensive creator from a blue line, but he can get implicated in both directions. And that physicality, that defensive solidity are things that will quite likely get him selected in the top 32 come draft day. And he'd be a pretty high value selection, the high floor pick as well. And next up, we have Terrence Smith, another WHLer. There's definitely a theme here in the first segment with our honorable mentions, but he's a bit of a different player. While the other WHLers, actually, he's similar to Harrison Brunicke in some senses. He's a really good skater, very good puck handler, very dynamic. His highlight reel of like offensive creation is really bright and very exciting. And his two-way impact is still developing. Some of the defensive decision-making could use some refinement, but he uses his range at 6'1", 176 pounds, pretty well to cover a decent amount of ice. And there have also been some nice flashes of him reading the rush really well, suffocating play into the boards, keeping the play to the perimeter in order to defend the slot at all costs. So there's definitely still some progression to be made on like the maturity in the defensive implications, but his NHL projection is one of a two-way impact. And last but not least, one of my personal favorites out of the USHL, Luke Osburn. He plays the Youngstown Phantoms, and the production is not necessarily fantastic at 8 goals and 23 points through 60 games, but his progression, his tools, a lot of things about his profile are super promising to me. He is among the smartest players in this entire draft class. He reads the game really efficiently. He has excellent vision of the ice. He also makes his decisions extremely quickly. The processing speed is a massive strength here. He's a September 9th, 06 birthday, so he's 6 days before the cutoff to be eligible for the 2025 NHL Draft. He's 6 feet tall, 172 pounds. He's a left shot defenseman. Could still use to grow into his frame a little bit, but that high-end intelligence and the progression over the course of this season, starting out with like a limited bottom pairing role in Youngstown, not really necessarily having been expected to be an impactful player in that lineup whatsoever, and finishing the year playing some first pairing minutes alongside Andrea Strothman, who got picked in the 3rd round by the Columbus Blue Jackets last season. Just fantastic progression. He's so young for the draft class. He's so intelligent. He's a pretty decent skater. The handling and the playmaking have some real flashes of brilliance. So while they're not the most refined or polished as of yet, the progression there is really promising. And this is a player I would be very happy to take a swing on as soon as the early 3rd round or even the late 2nd. Really fun profile, just high intelligence, interesting tools, late birthday, beautiful things all around for Luke Osburn. And again, a two-way impact. He reads the game defensively so well. He protects the slot very effectively. It's why he was trusted with those first pairing minutes at the tail end of the season. But to launch us straight into our top 5, we have a European player. So my backyard in terms of scouting, Leon Muggli, another young player for the draft class. He's a 6 foot, 176 pound left shot defenseman born July 9th, 06. And he played this entire season in the Swiss National League, only logging 4 games at the U20 level, and all 42 other games were against pro competition for a really very strong EV2 lineup. And he scored 3 goals, added 9 assists for 12 points in that stretch. And he was also the captain for Team Switzerland at the U18 World Championships. And Muggli is a really projectable player in how he approaches the game. He keeps things simple. He reads the play well. He makes the smart, simple play more often than not. He's not going to try to be on every single highlight reel in the world, but he does have a real two-way impact. He's effective in transition. He defends the rush pretty effectively, despite not being the biggest guy in the world. His sense of timing and anticipation are certainly areas of strength in his defensive game, alongside with his stick work. He also is not afraid of getting implicated physically, even though he's not going to outmuscle opponents. He will get involved in those board battles and at the net front. And offensively, he's not going to be an offensive dynamo, which is why you didn't find him in our offensive defenseman ranking episode. But he will still chip in as a distributor. He guides play very well in the offensive zone rather than being the catalyst creating the high danger scoring chances. But really interesting player. I'm curious to see where he ends up going on draft day, because I could see a team reaching on him as early as 25th, and I could see him dropping as low as like 60th. So there's a pretty wide range where he could end up falling. And I know that our Swedish and Central European scout, Steph Bitchfield over at Dobber Prospects, is a massive fan of this player, in large part due to that maturity in the habits and the high-end decision-making, and just that well-rounded and projectable NHL profile. So we're not looking at a guy with top pairing upside here, but in that bottom four and being a bit of a Swiss Army knife, he's Swiss, definitely could work. But yeah, so in the next segment, we're going to look at our number 4 and number 3 ranked two-way defensemen. But before that, a quick word from our sponsors over at Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed. And that's why it's the hiring platform that you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed is a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. We streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you match candidates. And with Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed data in the USA. One of the things that I love about Indeed from the perspective of somebody being hired, because I have used Indeed in the past to get jobs, is that it is so upfront and honest in terms of what the salary is, what the expectations and the demands and the requirements are for a job. So you can either skip on to the next thing if you don't fit the requirements, or you can go ahead with what you have in front of you. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time only. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Alrighty, so let's jump in right here at number 4 on our ranking of two-way defensemen with Adam Jiricek, the younger brother of David, who was selected 6th overall, I believe, by the Columbus Blue Jackets back in the 2022 NHL Draft. And Adam, just like David, got a really rough injury at the World Junior Championships in a game against Team Canada, and he's been out for the rest of the season. He missed the entire back half of the year through injury, and that has made his draft stock a real wild card, because he has some fantastic tools that we're about to jump into, but there's some real decision-making woes, and his actual games against professional competition, where he played 19 this season, logging a single assist, were certainly error-prone and lacked a lot of polish and projectability. That said, this is a player who has a frame to really grow into. He's 6'2", only 168 pounds, but there are some reports that he's up to like 180 now after his injury, and he's a June 28th, 06 birthday who plays with a ton of violence in his game. He loves the physical side of the game, despite not having like the most filled out frame as of yet. He is incredibly vicious in initiating contact and really winning those gritty battles, whether it be at the net front or along the boards or on puck retrievals. It doesn't really matter. He likes to get initiated physically. Beyond that, he is also a fantastic skater. He has elite level mobility. The puck handling ability in a vacuum is quite strong. The decisions that support his puck handling have been a lot more questionable in my viewings, where against junior competition, the handling can look really high end at times, and his keep away game is just fantastic with his combination of handling and mobility. But against professional competition, it is often really shut down. He was out of his depth against pro competition this year, and I really wish that we would have gotten more footage of him playing against a U20 competition, which is really the level that he should have been at in terms of how polished his game is at this stage. But there's some real offensive upside in this player. Beyond just those raw tools, he has a really heavy shot as well. And at his best, he's able to link all those things together into a really dynamic package from the blue line, where he activates up to the half wall, where he's both a shooting and a passing threat, where he looks to get pucks towards the slot, where he uses his handling to get around a single forechecker, make a quick pass to a dangerous area to a teammate. He works really well with that space when he is in his flow and playing his game. But the flip side of it is a deer in the headlights. So the dichotomy in his game, really against junior versus pro competition this season, is going to really throw a wrench into where he ends up on draft day. It could be anywhere between 9th overall and like 60th overall. It is incredibly difficult to predict exactly where he's going to fall. It's likely going to be in that like 15 to 28 range if I had to bargain here. So while his game will act polished as of now, the upside for him is really high, extending to like a number 2 top pairing defenseman who needs a composed partner to really elevate him to that level. But his two-way impact could be a real area of strength. He's also capable in the breakout. He can use his mobility and his passing ability to launch really quick and intelligent counterattacks. The big hurdle here is going to be able to do so under heavy physical pressure of professional competition, right? And I'm very curious to see how his D+1 season goes, because there's such a wide range of possible outcomes with this player, and his development is one that I am going to very giddily track. I'm so curious to see what turns out here. But next up, we have a player who is a lot more simple to project, despite being a bit smaller. Zeev Buium is a 6-foot, 183-pound left shot defenseman who would be higher in this ranking if we were going for pure holistic draft rankings, but we're not. We're looking at pure two-way impact, and in that category, he is 3rd on our list. He played for the University of Denver this season in the NCAA as one of the youngest players in college hockey, and he scored 11 goals, 39 assists for 50 points through 42 games in the NCAA as a draft-eligible freshman, which is simply absurd. The offensive impact here is sky high, and the production already gives a very good indication of that. That was tied for first in the entire nation with Lane Hudson in point production. And beyond that regular season production, he was integral to elevating Denver to winning the Frozen Four tournament. So had a tremendous impact there in Denver this season. And a lot of that was down to just how intelligent, composed, and escapable he is. Whenever he gets the puck, he puts it into a better place, whether that be under pressure in the defensive zone, on a retrieval, or way up in the offensive zone when he's trying to create and going for a primary assist, perhaps, while targeting the slot. He makes highly intelligent and highly composed decisions on puck, but his off-puck and defensive game is also supported by that level of intelligence and calmness. He uses stick work and his mobility really well to shut down play on the rush. He shepherds play towards the perimeter very effectively against college competition, mind you. And while his defensive impact on its own isn't super high end as of yet, like definitely isn't a defensive defenseman, and he leans offense over defense, but the two-way impact is still too great to keep him outside of our top 3 in this ranking. And before we jump in with our top 2 players, which are going to be Sam Dickinson and Artyom Levshunov, first a quick word from our sponsors over at FanDuel. It's a winner-take-all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And you can spend that on anything, ranging from spreads to player props to over and unders and more. You can even go for same game parlays, which are my personal favorites because they make the action all the more exciting. And that's even more so the case when you are attending an event live. What's better than upping the action as much as you possibly can by hand selecting a couple categories to hedge your bets on? Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Alrighty, let's cap off the episode here, starting with Sam Dickinson. He is a hulking 6'3", 194-pound left shot defenseman, a June 7th, '06 birthday, so he will have barely turned 18 by the time the draft comes around. And he played for the London Knights this season, logging 18 goals, 70 points in 68 regular season games, and also played a massive role in their obviously massive playoff run, winning the OHL championship, where he scored 4 goals, added 9 assists to 13 points through 18 games. And this is a player who is typically touted as a defensive defenseman. He uses his physicality, his high-end mobility, and his sense of timing very effectively to shut down play. He is a tremendous rush defender. He's like a brick wall on that left side of the ice for London. And his in-zone defending against the cycle at the net front is mean. He's never afraid to show his physicality and that violence that he does have in his game. But the on-puck game is also quite solid. He's a really good passer. He uses his mobility in tandem with his handling and his passing ability to be a really potent weapon in transition. The handling's the weakest of those tools by a decent margin. He's a really high-end passer along with that elite level mobility. And the decision making behind a lot of his game is still a bit of a work in progress. It's a bit raw at this stage. So there's an element of neuroticism. So he makes some confounding decisions when pressured at times. But as a whole, he's a very reliable player, despite those occasional slip-ups. But that's true on both sides of the puck, to be sure. There are definitely moments where he misjudges the moment where he does want to take a big stance to defend the blue line, for instance, and make that aggressive push to make a stop defensively or to activate offensively. But that is a thing that needs some refinement. And he also just needs more puck touches and more time on ice. He was playing second pairing minutes and second pairing power play for the vast majority of this season and still ended up as over a point a game, despite being young for this draft class and being mainly touted as a defensive defenseman. He's going to go very high on draft day. He's almost a certain slam dunk top 10 selection. I'd be very surprised if he fell beyond that range. And he could even go as high as third overall. That's definitely not impossible with this profile of player. And the upside with him is huge. He could be a number two-way defenseman who needs perhaps a steadying force on a top pairing, who can make those high composure decisions for him. For instance, playing with Zeev Buium would be a fantastic mix for Sam Dickinson. But yeah, he projects as a fantastic and mobile and entertaining on both sides of the ice two-way defenseman, and I'm curious to see which team ends up taking the swing on him on draft day. But to finish off the episode, we have the only player that, at least for me, was in contention truly for this number 1 slot, and that is Artyom Levshunov. He is the definition of a two-way defenseman in terms of the players eligible in this draft class, and he's likely going to go top 3 on draft day, and there's so many reasons for that. He's an elite level skater. He's 6'2", 209 pounds. He's a right shot defenseman, and yes, he's a bit older for this draft class as an October 28th, '05 birthday, but he just came off a fantastic season with Michigan State University in the NCAA, logging 9 goals, 26 assists for 35 points in 38 games, and that was only Levshunov's second season after playing in the Belarusian U18 league, which is a jump in competition, to say the least. Yeah, he had 1 season in the USHL last year where there were a fair amount of decision-making woes in terms of spamming shots from the point or completely misjudging a risk to be taken. The risk assessment gauge was a bit out of whack last season still, but he's progressed so steeply in a great way in the last year. He's a physical specimen. He's likely the hardest worker in this entire draft class on the physical side of things, both in terms of the raw athleticism that he's earned for himself, or also everything that you hear coming out of Michigan State of him being on the ice an hour or two before any teammate every single practice and still being there when the last other teammate leaves. He is incredibly strong, incredibly quick. plays with violence when he wants to. The defensive solidity is certainly dependent on the decision making, a little bit like with Sam Dickinson, where there are still moments of some erratic play in the defensive zone, but he's really capable at clearing the net front. He's excellent on retrievals. He springs the breakout really effectively and also dynamically. In the offensive zone, he really happily activates up to the hash marks, constantly looks for passes to the slot. Really a creator from the blue line at the NCAA level already as a freshman. And there's so much to like here. The upside is sky high. He could be a number one defenseman at the end of the day. I have him ranked inside my top 5 at the moment for good reason, and his two-way impact is nothing to scoff at. But that wraps up this episode of Locked On NHL Prospects. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what your ranking in this player archetype would have been. I'd be very curious to read what you all have to say. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, head over to Locked On Sports Today, a 24-hour-a-day constant stream with all of your with all of the sports news that you could possibly want to have access to. But I've been Sebastian High, not joined by my typical co-host, Hattie Kalikesh, today, and we are both the directors of scouting over at Dauber Prospects, and are both heading to Las Vegas for the NHL Draft and cannot wait to bring you content from the draft floor. But that wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for listening.